This is TWiT.
Many, many years ago, 17 years ago, that Scott Bourne and Alex, Lindsay, and I sat at the Yerba Buena Center watching Steve Jobs reveal. We were hoping it was the iPhone, right, Alex? Remember that Scott was going to make an iPhone vest? Scott had speculated, I think it was Scott had speculated that it was going to be called the iPhone. Nobody really knew at the time. And of course, Steve said something about a communicator, an internet communicator, phone. What did he say? What were the three things?
It's a phone, it's an internet device, and it's an iPod, a video iPod.
An iPod.
We have three devices that we're showing off. Do you get it?
Getting it yet?
Yeah.
I play it every year this time of year. I don't want to get taken down. Is it safe to play it? I don't even know.
I don't know. There's only one way to find out. I don't think it gets taken down anymore. You just get a strike, don't you? You don't get a strike.
I don't want a strike. That's not a good thing.
You get a flag. No one cares about flags. I mean, unless you're trying to make.
Anthony says, "Don't do it."
We've been told, "Don't do it." Let's not.
All right.
Poke the bear.
Is it a flag or a strike? Because I bet you it's just a flag.
It's not a strike, I'm sure. What if I don't turn the sound on?
Just do it. I think you're probably okay with the sound. Just don't do it full screen.
As you can see here, Steve Jobs is saying.
As you can see, he's saying a phone, an internet device,
a breakthrough internet communication device, a widescreen iPod, and a telephone.
And then,
are you getting it yet?
Yeah. And I remember the audience was getting more and more agitated. I remember Scott was getting really agitated. And then Steve finally says, "Are you getting it? It's all three in one." And the audience goes,
yeah.
And there's the announcement. It's an iPhone, and Scott said, "I win the bet."
Yeah, and it wasn't a big surprise. There'd been like the most rampant, rabid like rumors for the past year that they were working on a phone. I don't think anybody was expecting it to be exactly like that, given the status of even the really good smartphones that are out there right now. But this is why there's so much energy in the room, because they knew that something was going on.
The story was the engineers at Google who had working on the first Android phone were watching them, and they went, and back to the drawing board quickly.
Yeah. So we're not going to make. I guess we're not going to be stealing from BlackBerry. We're going to be stealing from somebody else.
Yes.
Well, and I think that all the articles were like about the rumors were all like, well, Apple's going to learn its lesson. Like it thinks it can do phones, and it can't do. Like
just going to walk in.
This is a big, dangerous world out there, the cell phone world.
Oh, remember Steve Ballmer mocking, laughing at it? Can I play that
for the iPhone? That's called hubris.
He said
also, keep in mind the reaction to the iPod, and everybody scoffed at that too. You'd think people could have learned a lesson from that. They didn't. They didn't.
Well, to be fair, or excuse me, I'm sorry, to be a little bit lenient, realize that a lot
fully subsidized with a plan. I said that is the most expensive phone in the world. And it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great mobile devices.
Okay, we'll just stop there. Their strategy,
it may
obviously,
sell very well or not. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you know what? And Paul Thurrott will always say this. Ballmer was right. It was too expensive because the price was dropped very, very quickly, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that short price drop was really what he was worried about, and then he was going to be, and not the the keyboard and the.
There was a lot of reason for people to be skeptical, because Steve Ballmer was making some points that even like a not really great smartphone in 2006 could absolutely kick the iPhones, but in terms of basic features like. Again, it didn't have cut, copy, and paste. It was a slow modem. It didn't have the enterprise features that if you're buying them in bulks of 100 for your company. And also, more importantly, one of the most innovative and important things that Apple did was to browbeat AT&T into saying, okay, guess what? We are not going to make the hardware that you want us to make. You are going to sell the phone that we made, and you're also going to give us a data plan that is not absolutely that doesn't choke the device, and that we are actually going to be putting a real normal web browser on this thing. No WAP apps. We are going to get, you're going to have, it's all this sort of stuff that only a company as desperate as AT&T in 2005, 2006 would have possibly agreed to. So there was a lot of short-sightedness, but there was reason for a certain amount of speculation.
I'm not saying that skepticism wasn't merited. I'm saying after Apple did what they did with the iPod, where everybody laughed at it and then got called on the carpet later because it was a huge hit, that maybe a little restraint might have been in order, because like, what if they did it again, right? And Ballmer's tone there, I mean, like, he's laughing, and the BlackBerry guys were laughing, and
that was the end of BlackBerry.
I mean, I know he is, but like, there are moments where you could have a little restraint, and there wasn't.
Notice, by the way, I have not laughed out loud at the Vision Pro. I have shown great
You're keeping your gunpowder dry. You'll wait for your moment for the coup de grace. I have no doubt.
You made fun of the watch.
I wasn't. I didn't make fun of it, but I said, "Look, who wants this?" It was a sidecar for the phone. Do you think I made fun of it? I actually mocked it.
No, I said you didn't make fun of it, but a lot of people were making fun of the watch,
and I own one.
Well,
I'm very happy. And first, the watch was not that useful. By the way, if you agree with Steve Ballmer that the iPhone 17 years later needs a keyboard, good news. Mr. Mobile has a keyboard for you.
Somebody made a dumb keyboard.
This is the clicks
sticking out of your dumb pocket.
Creator keyboard.
Also, the demo and installation video comes on Laserdisc.
Did you guys see BlackBerry the movie?
Oh God, that was so good. And that was good. I don't know how accurate it was. I think it was fairly accurate, except for how they dressed and stuff. But I think that the fact that they really just missed the iPhone. They had no idea what it was going to do.
The storm was so bad.
Yeah.
I had to do a thing where I was doing something, and I guess I got sponsored to do something in Brazil where I was already going to Brazil to do something else, and so they had to do the storm, and I had to use the storm to do it and shoot video of me using the storm to do like whatever. And it was just like all the cuts in between were like, how do I get this thing to actually work? And I'm going to go back to my, like I tried to use it the way that I was supposed to be using it. And I used it, but I was like, I'm never using this again. Like as soon as I got home, I was like, oh, this is horrible.
Lisa had one.
It was so buggy. Like you push on the button and nothing would work. And it was just exactly what they showed in the film.
The whole screen was the click button. The whole screen.
Yeah. It was so bad. So bad.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of amazing. The iPhone is 17 years old today. At least the announcement of you remember we ran over to Macworld Expo and they had one probably non-working in a glass display case.
In a little glass case.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nope. I mean, I get just like Jason's like getting taken out to dinners like for 6 months because he got like 30 minutes with a Vision Pro. Like I got 45 minutes with a mostly working iPhone at a briefing after the thing. And again, I could just let me.
Man.
Steve was angry that day, my friends.
6 months of saying I touched it and I used it, and also the great stories that we can tell now about things like you tapped on the Notes app and it was a screenshot of what the Notes app was going to look like, and you're like, okay, not that one. And the other thing I really remember from it, other than being blown away by the high resolutionness of the screen, and we think of it now, it wasn't Retina and it was garbage, but like compared to another device like a Mac, the high resolution of it, the fact that it was right under your finger, and again, now they make these OLED displays and laminated displays where it's right up at your finger, and it was way down, but it felt so direct in a way that it didn't before. So I remember that and being kind of speechless.
Right.
And the whole thing was just so good. And then the other thing I remember is that it was warm, which at the time I was like, oh, it's like a magical warm object. And now I think back to think about how it was burning through that battery the whole time. But still, it was a real moment. And Andy's right. For 6 months, we were a handful of people outside Apple who could actually say that we used it. And boy, that's nice when that happens.
And it really did create an era. I mean, it changed the world in ways.
Absolutely.
I would argue the technology industry's most important product category in its history is the smartphone, right? And I don't think in our lifetimes we will ever see a category like smartphones, not just saying the iPhone, but like all the fact that so quickly everybody on the planet now has a supercomputer in their pocket connected to a global high-speed network. Right. Like that happened
that was obvious.
Overnight.
Right. And it happened overnight. And, a lot of things we think about, they might happen. Sometimes you see things where everybody's thinking about the same thing at the same time. And eventually it just popped, like the car or the plane, or radio. Those things were things that a lot of people were thinking about all at the same time. It was all, all around the world. This one, I mean, people were using phones, but because it had become so gradual, there was so much already existing weight of where phones were that without someone just sticking a spike into it, it was probably going to continue that way for quite some time before you got away from the BlackBerry and the Nokias, and that full screen thing was not something that was really a thing until Apple made it a thing.
Yeah, I mean, even if we put the qualifier that smartphones existed before the iPhone, productivity devices as smartphones existed before the iPhone, phones with app stores, 3G, cut, copy, and paste that were work with Microsoft Exchange, and was very. I mean, I still have very fond memories of the couple of phones that I used before the iPhone. However, we went from every phone having a bunch of interpretations of what the software should be like, a bunch of interpretations about what the hardware should look like. Yes, the BlackBerry model was one model, but there were flip phones, there were still candy bar phones, there were still other interpretations. But then, boom, right after this spike was put into the ground, every phone was a sheet of glass as small and compact as it could possibly be. And that wasn't because Apple screwed up the first iPhone. It wasn't because the first iPhone was only 2G and did not have cut, copy, and paste. It's because it proves that, and this might be instructional for the Vision Pro, people are willing to forego and overlook limitations if they get that kind of basic, when your spidey sense goes off in the back of your head. And that's what happened when I used the iPhone for the first time. That tingling sensation from my neck all the way up to my scalp that said, this is right. I don't know. I'm not going to review something that is clearly 4 months away from being introduced, let alone being a version 1.0. But there's something that is fundamentally and manifestly right about what they're doing here. And I'm on board. So Vision Pro, if it produces that same sort of effect in the first 30 minutes to 45 minutes, people are willing to wait a couple of years for it to become more practical.
That the Vision Pro is the Newton. And by the way, I have somewhere, I can't find it, but there's a video of me on KSFO back in whatever that was. When was it? 1995, 96, when the Newton came out, saying if you just could connect this to the internet, and make it a little bit smaller, the Newton was so close to what the iPhone eventually became, and the lessons Apple learned from the Newton definitely communicated to the iPhone. The Newton was the reason Apple invested in ARM and created, in effect, ARM, and the ARM processor was for the Newton.
True.
That's, of course, what made the iPhone possible, and still today makes Apple Silicon possible. So I think if you want to look at the history of the iPhone, I don't think that the Vision Pro is iPhone 1 so much as Newton. I
think
again, like I said before, that's a danger, particularly if you extend that metaphor to Palm, saying that, hey, that's the great $800 device you have that's way too big and is not really very practical. We're going to take all the good ideas from this, take away all the bad ideas, and basically make you obsolete.
Yeah,
I think that the only difference is that Apple wasn't the largest company in the world, or roughly the largest company in the world when they did.
That's a good point. They are now.
There's a level of brute force that Apple has that doesn't exist for other companies. In the one of the things that I was talking about, the fact that companies will see Microsoft competing with them somewhere, and Apple did this in the 90s where Apple wanted to be the Microsoft against Microsoft. I got lots of different products and we got all these things, and they were trying to out Microsoft. And I was like, you should never do that because they're really big. They have, they're really what works for them is not what works for you anymore. They can't do what you do, but you can't, you got to find out what you do well and stop trying to go head to head with them because they're way too big, especially competing with Office or 365. That's a horrible idea, and so in that sense, Apple's playing a game that only they and maybe 5 other companies in the world can play, and they have spent 10 years playing it, and they are going to spend 10 more years playing it. Yeah. So
remember that the Newton was the pet project of Darth Scully. Steve Jobs' sworn enemy. And if it had been a project that Steve himself had been backing, had been talked into, had been really felt behind, who knows, within 3, 4, 5 years, it could have been the pocket-sized thing with built-in mobile broadband, and we would now be using an evolution of the Newton message pad instead of an iPhone, for good or for better.
I hope that they don't take this down, but here is Jason Snell and Leo Laporte at Macworld 2007.
Right? But it's not there, and they haven't talked about that yet.
And I don't know. Somewhere in here, I'm sure we talk about the iPhone.
What they told us today, I don't know. But
this is you, by the way. This is the dining out portion, Jason.
So it just shows how complicated a product like this could be. And until we dig into it, until really we all get our hands on them, we're not going to know. But I got to give them credit for taking the shot and saying like they did with the iPod. Look, there are phones out there, just like there were MP3 players out there. They're not any good, and we're going to do something that's totally different and that we think is actually going to be much easier to use. Good for them. That is Apple's DNA right there. Right.
We haven't changed much over the years, have we, Jason?
Still the uncynical, fresh-faced young punks.
Jason Snell. That's actually MacBreak 40, giving you some idea of how long we've been doing this thing.
There was a podcast on the floor about 10 feet away from the iPhone that John Gruber and Merlin Mann and I did. That you can, parts of it are around there, but one of the things we did is we all basically invented the App Store while we were standing there.
Wow.
Like, this web thing isn't going to happen. They're going to have, like, maybe next year, they're going to have
web apps are terrible,
a store where and third-party, there's going to be a third-party developer story, and it's just not ready yet. And that, it's floating around, but like we did nail it. I actually dug that out of an archive somewhere at one point because it had disappeared from the internet. And I was like, no, that was a really good one. Like, we got it. We got it exactly right a year before it happened.
Yeah.
So
it
was obvious. It was obvious that was just BS when he said it was a sweet solution, and that all the developers we knew already were like, we're going to find a way to write for this platform. And it took them, a year and 3 months, a year and 5 months in order to get it there. Yeah.
There was a jailbreak app store before a legitimate app store. Developers just figured out how to write apps that would target an iPhone on their own. You're absolutely right. That's how much developers were like, no. We want to write, even if we have to do it illegally and without the approval of Apple, I'm going to put some effort into developing apps for the iPhone.
They would not be denied.
Oh, you found it from huffduffer.com.
Yeah, it's like Instapaper for MP3s. There's a MP3 link there, but that's what it was. I don't know where in that clip it is, but we did do it, so I'm happy to have that.
Snell, Gruber, Mann, iPhone launch.
Okay, I'm here with Jason Snell from Macworld and John Gruber from Daring Fireball.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
The question that I'm curious about today
the podcast within a podcast.
Looking at applications on the iPhone and how we think that'll work. We've seen Safari. We've seen some other stuff. What do you think is going to happen?
My guess is that Apple will eventually let developers onto the platform, and the real question is going to be how.
App Store, brilliant! You get the prize
we got there.
For prognostication.
It wasn't a hard prediction, right? Like, it was so clear everybody desperately wanted to be on there, and I don't even know why. I think Steve Jobs was just blunting everybody's excitement by saying, "Oh, it's a really sweet solution," but the truth was, like, the developers at Apple were barely even at the point where they were, obviously some of those apps hadn't even been built yet. Like, the tools to build apps weren't there yet. So the last thing you're going to do is let developers have tools that don't exist that you're building as you're building the apps. So of course it was going to take a little bit of time, but it boggled the mind that web apps was going to be the solution. And of course it wasn't. It just took them a year.
Patrick Delahany wants to know if you know anything about tomorrow's lottery numbers, Jason, because he needs to make it rich. We're going to take
42, always 42.